Welcome to Dare to be Legendary, a podcast brought to you by Diversa Partners. In this podcast, we'll be sitting down with some of the brightest minds in tech, the founders, the visionaries, the entrepreneurs, the executives, that all have one thing in common. They are the leaders of today that are entirely transforming the technology ecosystem as we know it. In each episode, our guests will share their journey, vision, and market expertise with us. They are the ones who dare to be legendary.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dare to be Legendary podcast. I'm Gary Constance, and it's my pleasure to be able to introduce one of Silicon Valley's finest serial entrepreneurs in Ion Stoica. He's not only the co-founder of Conviva, Databricks, and Anyscale, but is also a tenured professor at UC Berkeley, the computer science department, where he currently leads the RISE Labs, which focuses on developing tech for real-time intelligent, secure executions.
Thanks for the introduction, and very happy to be here.
I was actually introduced to Jan by Andreessen Horowitz back in 2015 when he was just founding Databricks. I think the company was maybe Series B funded with minimal revenue at that time. And Jan was the CEO, and we did the sales search where we had helped recruit Ron Gabrisco, who's now the CRO of the company. So he's been there from zero to almost a $30 billion valuation. I appreciate you being here today, and I'm really proud of the professional relationship we've built over the years. Let's begin. I wanted to ask you, Jan, so how did you get your start? Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Did you always want to be in tech?
So to answer your question, I was always math, physics, programming, and things like that. With respect to being an entrepreneur, as a high level, what you want to do, you want to have an impact. And by impact, you'll change the way people do things in your narrow field of activity. I mean, of course, hopefully you change for the better. And in some sense, being an entrepreneur and creating a company, starting a company, is very much about that, right? And I think all the best companies, they have a goal to improve. And if you think about Microsoft, Bill Gates was saying a computer in every home, on every desk, or something like that. Or Google, organize the world information, right? So you have this kind of goals, but it's obviously from the goals that they fundamentally improve, they make an impact, improve society, improve the way people work, interact. This is what attracted me, and many of these inventions are coming from academia.
Was there any specific inflection points in your life that have helped define who you are today as an entrepreneur, and any key attributes you think of that have made you successful along the way?
I think there are many things you are going to learn along the way. It's a learning process, little by little. At the end of the day, I learned many times by making mistakes. Fundamentally, that's what learning is. I'll talk about Databricks because it's a big company. But when we started Databricks, it's data science at scale. There were not many at that time, right? However, so there are two trends there we basically focus on. Data scientists, you are going to have more and more data scientists. And why was that? Because you can see that almost every university was starting or thinking to provide data science degrees. So you could think that in a few years, you are going to have a lot of more data scientists than at that point. The second thing was data, right? Data are going to increase in volume. So that was kind of it's clear. So now you want to empower this kind of new profession, data scientists, to operate and analyze this data at scale and to make it as easy as possible, as fast as possible. That was kind of the idea. And if you do that, then you are going to enable that to be transformational for many industries, because it was obvious that even obviously at that time, it was 2013, if you look at Google, Facebook, and so forth, they are fundamentally data companies. So you have proof points that at least in some industries, you can get a huge value by processing and getting insights, operationalizing the data. As a company, as a small company, you can have a higher chance to be able to dominate a small market, because the big incumbents, they are not going to pay attention to a small market, because even if they get a small market, it's not going to move the needle on the revenue, right?
I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the impactful moments that you've had in terms of development along the way as an entrepreneur, and any feedback that was difficult to hear but was really impactful for you in your career.
So one thing is about, I remember also Ben Horowitz said that, and it's in his book, The Hard Things About Hard Things. It's about hiring for strengths. It makes the decision in some sense simpler. It's not now you have 15 attributes and then you are going to rank this candidate by 15 attributes. It's a lot of noise in the process when you do that. Hiring for the strength, it simplifies the problem. And I think the other one, Scott Schenker, one of my mentors, it's also life is too short to think in some sense about what other people think about you. Of course, you want to make sure that, you do everything with a high level of integrity and so forth. But, just, go for it.
As a leader of the AMP lab and current leader of the RISE lab, I'm sure you've had the opportunity to groom some of the most, innovative minds in tech.
Yes, great. So I should say, and it's the one thing I am the most proud of with these companies, it's about the team. And we never had this kind of, like you see sometimes happening, any significant friction. So I'm very proud about the teams and how influential have been. If you think about Databricks, it's like still the founders play a huge role.
You don't find that, often, that a core group of people, right? That's great that you guys have worked so well together.
So in terms of what you are going to see, I think that one other things I think that in terms of the big area where we are going, I think we are going to see a lot of innovation. And it's about processing, doing analytics. Every organization wanted to process more and more data. And when you say more data, it's not a bigger volume of the same kind of data, but different data sets, right? And on the other hand, you see that much more increased concern with privacy, other regulations, both for users or regulation, right? GDPR in Europe, California, Consumer Privacy Act, CPA, and so forth, right? So these are incompatible, these two trends. More and more privacy, more and more confidentiality. So you need a solution to resolve this tension. And that solution, fundamentally, you need to be able to process the data without compromising confidentiality and privacy. So I think that's one interesting direction. What are the other trends? So obviously it's about machine learning. I mean, I'm not the expert there, but it's huge. You need huge amount of work of making this machine learning more to interface better with the humans, right? Make it more explainable, understand what's happening and why it's happening. This is critical for social equity and many other things. But these are a couple of things. And, I'm sure I'll see a lot of startups over the next couple of years, hopefully many coming from Berkeley.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we will. So one of the other questions I had was, at Diversa, we talk a lot about how to tell a story, right? How you tell a story can really set you apart. And so in past kind of interviews, you've also emphasized on storytelling, especially when it comes to, fundraising. And so could you walk us through how you've constructed and told the Databricks story when you walked into VC firms? What was the emphasis of your story, and what did you make sure the people listening came away with?
At a high level, we are in the best position to make it happen. You have to bet on it. You cannot afford not to bet on this. From all people who are in that space, you should bet on us because we are in the best position to do it. In the case of Databricks, it was data, right? Big data. Big data was growing leaps and bounds, and everyone was seeing data as it would be transformational for every industry. But what is the gap? What is the challenge? The challenge is that you need to make sense of this big data, right? And you need to get insights. You need to process it. And fundamentally, the ability to do it, sophisticated processing and do it extremely quickly. So you can do it interactively. Now, we developed the open source Spark. So you have the best solution, right? It's like I mentioned, right? There is a huge gap, a growing gap between the demands of these modern applications. You cannot use only one machine. But programming these many machines is super hard. Right? We make it that easy. We make it possible. We make it as easy as developing or writing the programs on your own laptop. And the second one is also people believe it's inevitable. Because no matter what you think, if people don't believe it's inevitable, they don't believe that you can make it happen just single-handedly, right? It's being at the right time, in the right place. And then obviously you need to convey the fact that you can win.
I think, certainly the timing and the team, right? And the market, product, having all those pieces coming together in real time makes a ton of sense as to how you guys were able to build it. And it's still hard, right? It's still, there's always challenges along the way, even when you have those things.
The ideas are easy, execution, it's everything.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you now, the market is obviously, it's insane right now, right? The company's going public and, you got SPAC deals, venture-backed companies, lots of stuff happening. Now, after Databricks and kind of the latest, raise, right, early this year, can you give us some insight into the company's strategy in the near future? Do you see an IPO on the horizon?
I cannot comment on that. But the strategy of the company, it's very clear. Databricks, it's one-stop shop for everything data, right? It's an end-to-end platform. Everything from query the data, transforming the data, getting insights, and making prediction on the data. Fundamentally being a platform, a data platform, and AI platform for enterprise. And like we discussed earlier, it's about execution.
And one of the things that you talked about earlier was kind of the open source, right? So open source has obviously had a massive impact on the tech industry in recent years, especially.
Yeah.
The only thing, executives in the space seem to agree on is that, there's more change and innovation on the horizon. What does the kind of future of open source look like from your perspective?
Yeah, actually, let me go back because I think this is a very good part of the story. So when I started, sometimes to understand or to predict the future, you need to look at the past. So when we started Databricks, I remember that we were thinking about, among us, a group of the founders, a little bit earlier. And we look around and what are the successful open source companies? And it was only one big success, Red Hat.
Mm-hmm.
I remember at that point it was 16, 17 billion valuation, if I remember correctly. None of the other companies was having it's hard to believe. When we thought about it, we couldn't figure out which one was over 1 billion valuation. So we are a little bit puzzled about what we are going to do. I mean, it doesn't seem that there are big successes in the open source. So it's only Red Hat, and we didn't want to build a Red Hat company. So in some sense, that's why one of the reasons we went on the cloud, because we thought it's a different business model, right? We bet fully on the cloud, and there are several reasons for that. So, but one reason I remember even now, it's easier to develop, easier to upgrade, easier to iterate. It's all this technical reason. But one reason I was thinking that if you go on-premise, and you have an open source business, the choice of the customer is, I'm going to get the open source for free, $0, or I'm going to pay $1 to the company to support it, or provide some others bells and whistles around it. It's between $0 and $1. If you go to the cloud, the choice is between, well, I'm going to pay $1 to AWS, Azure, or Google, GCP, or I'm going to pay $1 to the cloud provider and say $1 to, say, Databricks. So it's from $1 to $2. Going from $1 to $2 is easier than going from $0 to $1. It's both perception-wise, but it's another subtle thing. When you go from $1 to $2, there is already a budget there. If you try to go from $0 to $100, the problem is there is no budget for $0. So you need to create a budget. So it's about the business model, right? It's clear there's a lot of innovation in the open source. Now the enterprises love open source because they don't want to be locked in. And I think that it's about what we'll see innovation on the cloud, but we'll see. I think that another thing what will happen, and you'll see also in the case of in trend-wise, we are going to transition from a world in which you have this kind of distinct clouds to a world in which you are going to have more and more solutions which are going to be multi-cloud. And there will be solutions or services which you are not even going to know which cloud is going to be used under the hood. That will be another thing, transformational. And the open source, it's going to play an important role in that world because the open source in general runs on all clouds. I think that for us, going back historically, the business model and transformational now going SaaS for open source has proven a winner, not only for Databricks, but almost for many other companies, MongoDB and Confluent and things like that. So therefore, you should think that other innovation of the business model will further propel the open source because open source is here to stay.
Open source right now, I mean, it couldn't be any hotter, right? I mean, it's becoming a model.
Sorry, one last thing. Now it's happening also in hardware. It's also another research project from Berkeley, which is basically, instruction set computers, the instruction of the processor, they are open, right? It's like open source, right? Everyone can use them. There is no royalty, right? It's a company, Sci-Fi, also from Berkeley, behind that. But you see that transformation not only in software, but now more and more in hardware.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So one of the other things as I was going to ask you was, as we kind of begin to live life kind of hopefully post-pandemic, what's your stance on kind of remote working and productivity?
That's a very good question. I think that if COVID will absolutely disappear, I think we will still remain with some flexibility, but I think that it will be much less than people imagine. I think people will come back to normal very quickly. There will be more flexibility of working from home, but I don't think it will be a dramatic change, a fundamental change. And the reason for that, I think that we as humans need the interaction with other humans. We haven't changed, physically, emotionally for hundreds of thousands of years. 2 years will not change us probably in any significant way. We will not suppress those needs.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Lastly, what do you think is the most challenging part of your job and where do you have the most fun?
I think one of the things I have the most fun is strategy and planning, trying to figure out what is a path and then thinking hard about the steps to follow that path, right? And then the other interesting thing, if you hit a roadblock, is like learning. It's about learning as fast as possible. I think the most challenging, to tell you the truth, and it's how you build the teams, how you motivate people. There are, how you resolve the conflicts. I have to tell you, this is what I find challenging. It's like, it's not math, it's just pure logic.
I can see that. Now, as we kind of wrap up, what advice would you kind of give to the next generation of the tech leaders?
I think it's three things. Number one, you have to work and you have to pick to solve a problem you are passionate about. And that's why you should start a company. Because you believe that what you are going to solve is going to make a change and you are passionate about it. The second one, you can think hard, but once you think hard, just believe in it. Follow, I wouldn't say not only instincts, but start from, first, principle, right? From clean slate. Just don't listen to what everyone is saying. I wouldn't start the journey alone. Just get a team of people you trust. Trust is by far the most important aspect. There are going to be a lot of blind spots you have, and people around you and people who are super close to you and you trust are going to help you to go around them.
That's great advice. I'm so glad we had a chance to do it. And congrats on all the success there at Databricks and Anyscale as well. Just super happy that we had a chance to work together on both those opportunities, and look forward to the future as well.
Thanks for listening to Dare to Be Legendary, brought to you by Diversa Partners. Feel free to check out the show notes for resources that we've mentioned throughout the episode. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, share with friends, and leave us a review. This helps us get content to more listeners like you. Thanks again, and stay tuned for our next episode.